работает? Здесь что, система работает? Окей.
Dear friends, colleagues, distinguished guests, I would like to start off by thanking our Swiss hosts for the excellent work organizing this meeting here in Geneva. Your hospitality and dedication to making this meeting a success is very highly valued. I would also like to thank Hannes German, Speaker of the Council of States of Switzerland, and Minister Didier Burkhalter, OSCE Chairman in Office, and President of the Swiss Confederation for participating today. Being here in Geneva for this autumn meeting to discuss new security challenges, I can't help but reflect on the model of Swiss diplomacy that has kept this nation out of war for hundreds of years. That's something special in our continent. The famous Swiss policy of neutrality has enabled a lasting peace and security that has contributed to the level of prosperity that is the envy of the world. Switzerland has also made major contributions to the promotion of international relations and security. The Swiss government's initiatives have given rise to such vital institutions as the International Committee of the Red Cross and the 4 Geneva Conventions. Switzerland also hosts numerous United Nations and other international organizations. Last December, Switzerland hosted a conference including dozens of countries, international organizations, civil society groups, and private companies who reiterated their commitment to improving the legal framework for all private military and security companies. The conference took place 5 years after the adoption of Montreux document, in which governments agreed that international humanitarian law and international human rights law apply to the activities of private military and security companies during armed conflicts. The leadership of the Swiss on this issue coincides with a considerable amount of attention that the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly has also paid to it. As far back as the year 1992 Budapest Declaration, the PA was stating the elected parliaments must have the ultimate authority and responsibility for the activities of the military forces. I recall the annual session in Astana, where we again took up the issue of private military and security companies. We urged participating states to ensure that these companies observe all obligations in regard to international humanitarian law and human rights, and to ensure that participating states extend parliamentary oversight to private military companies and private security companies. And In Baku, in our annual session in Baku this summer, the Assembly called upon the OSCE participating states to adhere to the fundamental principles and norms of international law, as enframed in the OSCE Code of Conduct on political-military aspects of security. This document, we said, should serve as a basis for interstate relations as well as political-military conduct with states, notably the democratic oversight of armed and security forces. But unfortunately, despite all this, we still have a long way to go in realizing these ideals. In the Ukraine conflict in particular, there has been much criticism, including from me, over the apparent funneling the weapons and personnel from Russia to eastern Ukraine, fueling the armed separatist movement there. In my recent meeting in Moscow, I underlined that Russia's stated commitment to diplomacy and peace in Ukraine requires a full accounting of its impact in the crisis as well as constructive action on the ground. I repeat what I said in Moscow. Any solution to the Ukraine crisis must be predicated on a genuine commitment by Russia to abide by the Helsinki document, including respect for its neighbors' sovereignty and territorial integrity. I'm cautiously optimistic at the recent signs of de-escalation. But while Moscow has borne the brunt of our criticism, we must also remember that the rules apply to both sides of the conflict. And Kyiv is equally responsible to ensure that armed militias fighting in its behalf respect the Code of Conduct, particularly its stipulations that all participating states will at all times provide for and maintain effective guidance to the control of its military, paramilitary and security forces, and that each state will ensure that its armed forces as such are politically neutral. There have been troubling reports that some of these militants are anything but politically neutral, and some indications that they are not operating under appropriate and effective guidance and control. At the moment, many of our countries are also preoccupied by the ongoing conflicts in Syria and Iraq, and particularly the rise of ISIS. By some estimates, more than 12,000 foreigners from at least 50 countries have gone to fight with rebels in Syria. About a quarter of these are reported coming from Western nations. As returning fighters might be inclined to engage in terrorist attacks, ISIS continues a concrete risk for all of us. With these radicalized individuals not only gaining compact experience and weapons trainings, but also access to transnational terrorist networks, there is a very real and very growing security threat to the OSCE region. And governments are now beginning their response. The United States has mobilized a military coalition for what could be a year-long campaign against ISIS, and some OSCE countries are moving to revoke passports of their citizens who have left to join extremist groups in Syria and Iraq. We are also faced with evolving challenges in the economic and environmental dimension, particularly the crisis of climate change. Mass demonstrations were held last month in cities across the world demanding action from the world leaders on the climate crisis. As we heard today, the Climate Change Conference in Lima, Peru, this December, it is high time that leaders take seriously all these calls as they work towards the legally binding and universal agreement next year in Paris. With all this in mind, as we discussed new security challenges and the role of parliaments over the next few days, I do hope that this assembly lives up to its highest potential as a forum of debate and a facilitator of the exchange of best practices. As security challenges grow by the day, so too does the need for multilateral cooperation rooted on common principles as expressed in Helsinki Final Act, the Code of Conduct, the Copenhagen document, and other landmark according of the OSCE. While we set the agendas for our parliaments, for our nations, and for the whole of the OSCE region, we should recall the spirit of Helsinki and principles outlined in the founding document nearby 40 years ago. In this anniversary approaches, the Parliamentary Assembly is engaged in a series of seminars known as a Helsinki Plus 40 project. The first of these was just held at the Russian International Affairs Council in Moscow in September, and it was a great success. As the link between the governmental side of the organization and the people in the OSCE area, the Parliamentary Assembly is a unique position to foster public debate and build support for strengthening the organization in the run-up to the 40 years anniversary of Helsinki Final Act. The Parliamentary Assembly is the OSCE's democratic backbone, bringing not only legitimacy of the organization, but also the OSCE's values back to our capitals. The role of our Assembly, as well as parliaments, has never been so clear as a way to build trust among those we represent here. To build that trust, however, we owe them a high level of discourse, dialogue, and debate. Ladies and gentlemen, just in this spirit, I look forward to exploring the vital issues of the day with you all here in Geneva and beyond. Thank you and welcome.
Sehr geehrter Herr Präsident der Parlamentarischen Versammlung der OSZE, Herr Kanerva, sehr geehrter Herr Vorsitzender der OSZE, Herr Bundespräsident Burkhalter, geschätzte Mitglieder der Parlamentarischen Versammlung der OSZE, Expertinnen, Experten, liebe Gäste, Medienschaffende, meine Damen und Herren. Es freut mich, Sie hier in Genf im Namen des Schweizerischen Bundesparlaments willkommen zu heißen. Ich fühle mich sehr geehrt, die Tagung des parlamentarischen Organs der OSZE zusammen mit Ihrem Präsidenten und mit dem Vorsitzenden der OSZE, unserem Außenminister, eröffnen zu dürfen. Nicht weniger als 53 der insgesamt 57 OSZE-Staaten sind hier an dieser Tagung vertreten. Allein diese hohe Beteiligung stellt schon einen Erfolg dar und zeigt, dass es eine gute Entscheidung war, Genf zu wählen. Genf, die Stadt des Dialoges zwischen den Völkern und Nationen. Es ist der ideale Ort für die diesjährige Herbsttagung. Auch wenn keine Resolution auf dem Programm steht, werden an dieser Tagung grundlegende Fragen behandelt. Es geht darum, den Handlungsspielraum zu prüfen, den die Parlamente haben, um der Bevölkerung bessere Lebensbedingungen zu verschaffen und sie vor den Folgen von Konflikten besser zu schützen. Diese Tagung soll zudem Gelegenheit bieten, über die Krise in der Ukraine und im Nahen Osten zu diskutieren und dabei der Diplomatie den Weg zu ebnen. Aus dem Dialog erhebt sich die Wahrheit. Platon hatte für sein bekanntes Werk nicht umsonst das Zwiegespräch mit Sokrates gewählt. Wissen lässt sich nur im zwei- oder mehrstimmigen Dialog erlangen. Nur im Dialog können wir uns von Einzelmeinungen lösen und zu höherer Erkenntnis gelangen. Für die Suche nach der Wahrheit ist der Dialog jenseits der Propaganda unerlässlich. So ist der Dialog zwischen den Staaten und innerhalb der Staaten von wesentlicher Bedeutung. Die Schweiz, die seit ihrer Gründung nach dem Bürgerkrieg in Zeiten des Sonderbundes in Frieden lebt, diese Schweiz kennt 4 Sprachregionen und 4 Landessprachen. Wichtig ist für sie aber vor allem die friedliche Koexistenz ihrer 26 Mini-Republiken. Sie sind souveräne Mini-Republiken. Das Gleichgewicht in unserem Land hängt mit der Verteilung der Macht auf lokaler, regionaler und nationaler Ebene zusammen. Der Föderalismus bildet den Nährboden für den Erfolg der Schweiz. Zudem haben sich die demokratischen Institutionen der Schweiz laufend an die Vorgaben von Politik und Gesellschaft anzupassen. Seit Anfangs des 20. Jahrhunderts wird der Nationalrat, unsere Volksvertretung, nach dem Proporzsystem gewählt, damit auch die politischen Minderheiten eine Stimme erhalten und die Meinungsvielfalt im Lande besser reflektiert wird. Geschätzte Parlamentarierinnen und Parlamentarier, die Bürgerinnen und Bürger der Schweiz sind zusammen mit dem Parlament für die Bundesverfassung und die Bundesgesetzgebung verantwortlich. Indem sie Volksabstimmungen anregen und in der Regel 4-mal pro Jahr an die Urne gehen, tragen auch unsere Bürgerinnen und Bürger ihren Teil zu den Gesetzeswerken bei, welche das gemeinschaftliche Leben in der Schweiz regeln. Politisieren und Abstimmen sind in der Schweiz ein wahrer Volkssport. Die Volksrechte sind das Fundament der von unten nach oben gewachsenen Schweiz. Die Urdemokratie in den Tälern der Zentralschweiz hat sich in verschiedenen Etappen über die restliche Deutschschweiz und schließlich über die französischsprachige und auch über die italienischsprachige Schweiz ausgebreitet. Die Referendumskampagnen und die Debatten über die Volksinitiativen führen immer wieder zu breiten öffentlichen Diskussionen, die von den Medien auch befeuert und weiterverbreitet werden. Allen liegt es am Herzen, sich eine eigene Meinung zu bilden. Die Regierung und das Parlament ihrerseits setzen alles daran, vom Volk nicht desavouiert zu werden. Sie beziehen deshalb andere Meinungen, möglicherweise schon zu Beginn eines Gesetzgebungsprozesses, ein. Unsere Politiker und Politiker gelten, wenn es darum geht, für eine Vorlage eine Mehrheit zu finden, zuweilen gar Allianzen mit einem anderen politischen Lager ein, gelegentlich sogar entgegen den Interessen der eigenen Partei oder ihrer Wählerschaft. In Zeiten ungezügelter Globalisierung ist die Schweiz jedoch nicht selten auch froh, dass ihr das Stimmvolk bisweilen etwas Gegensteuer gibt und uns vor gewissen überstürzten Entscheidungen auch bewahrt. Ich denke da zum Beispiel an die Übernahme gewisser internationaler Verträge oder auch an Gesellschaftsfragen, wo man oft versucht ist, einem Modetrend zu erliegen. Das politische System der Schweiz gleicht einer Waage, deren Gewichte stets den Ausgleich suchen, das heißt den Konsens zwischen den politischen Parteien. Innerhalb des OSZE-Raumes hingegen setzen die meisten Staaten auf langfristige Stabilität. Ihr System erinnert an die übergroße Uhr im Hotel Cornavin am Bahnhof hier in Genf. Deren Pendel ist 26 Meter lang und reicht von der 9. Etage bis hinunter ins Erdgeschoss. Das langsame und gleichmäßige Hin und Her des Pendels von links nach rechts und wieder zurück, das ist in meinen Augen so etwas wie ein Sinnbild für die steten politischen Machtwechsel in den Oppositionssystemen. Dass mir dieses Bild in den Sinn kommt, hat natürlich auch damit zu tun, dass die Uhrmacherei und die Mechanik zwei Trümpfe der Schweizer Wirtschaft sind. Aber unsere Demokratien sind nicht bloß perfekt funktionierende Räderwerke. Sie sind sehr vielgestaltig und vor allem lebendig. Unsere Institutionen widerspiegeln die Geschichte unserer Völker. Sie sind aus den Beziehungen mit unseren Nachbarn entstanden und sie stehen für unsere gemeinsamen Werte. Wenn es um den Schutz der Minderheiten und die Sicherheit unseres Kontinentes geht, baut die Parlamentarische Versammlung der OSZE auf den kleinsten gemeinsamen Nenner seiner Mitglieder, nämlich auf den Willen, die Sicherheit durch Zusammenarbeit zu gewährleisten. Ohne diesen Willen kann kein Dialog entstehen und lässt sich kein Vertrauen herstellen. Ihre Versammlung versucht, eine Plattform zu schaffen, wo die Denk- und Sichtweisen miteinander verbunden werden und sich gegenseitig bereichern. Eine Plattform, die Ihnen ermöglicht, die Welt besser zu verstehen, indem Sie sie mit anderen Augen betrachten, nämlich mit den Augen Ihrer Kolleginnen und Kollegen aus anderen Ländern. Ich bewundere die Ausdauer und die Politik der kleinen Schritte, die in dieser Versammlung gepflegt wird. Meine Damen und Herren, ich bedanke mich auch bei den Expertinnen und Experten, welche die Versammlung mit ihren Beiträgen in diesen Tagen bereichern werden. Ihnen allen wünsche ich, dass Ihnen diese Tagung den Rahmen für eine offene Debatte bietet und dass Sie Ihre Positionen, Ziele, Überzeugungen, Meinungen offen darlegen können. Ich wünsche mir, dass Ihnen allen Gehör geschenkt wird. Möge das spätsommerliche Genf Ihnen Gelegenheit für interessante Begegnungen und Gespräche bieten und möge Ihre Versammlung dank der Kraft des Dialoges den Weg zu Frieden und Eintracht ebnen. Ich danke Ihnen. Danke vielmals.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends from all over the USC area, first of all, let me tell you all a very warm welcome in my country, in Switzerland. We are very glad of you being here during our OSCE's presidency, and also warm-hearted welcome to Geneva, capital of peace. Geneva, this is also the home base of the ICRC, of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Yesterday, a Swiss delegate of the ICRC was killed in Donetsk. He came from the very same region as I do. This delegate stands for the essence of Switzerland, for what we are most proud of, humanitarian support, the humanitarian assistance to people in need. Today I would like to speak particularly for him and particularly for all the innocent victims of this conflict and for their families. The shores of beautiful Lake Geneva are home not just of the ICRC, but also of the European headquarters of the UN and to more than 30 other international organizations. About 250 NGOs are based here. This is a place where leaders frequently meet to discuss ways out of seminal crises, whether they concern Iran, Syria, Ukraine, and other locations in the world. Less known is that Geneva was the city to host the first ever multilateral East-West negotiation process. Between September 1973 and July 1975, delegates from 35 participating states gathered here in this very building to hammer out what came to be known as the CSCE Final Act. Signed at the Helsinki Summit on 1st of August 1975, this Final Act defined the common foundations and basic principles of European security, of our security. It has remained the reference text for the OSCE to this day. It is therefore very appropriate, ladies and gentlemen, that this year's autumn meeting of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly is taking place here, and I may add that it's being opened by a Finn and two Swiss. Almost 40 years after the Final Act was signed, European security is faced with a deep crisis that must be addressed. Discussions formats like this Parliamentary Assembly are important for finding ways to reconsolidate European security as a common project. The chairmanship of the OSCE reflects Switzerland's sense of responsibility to engage in international efforts to advance peace and security. It also underlines our commitment to the OSCE's approach to advancing security through dialogue, shared commitments, confidence building, and broad cooperation. Recent developments regarding Ukraine have shown that Switzerland's distinctive foreign policy stance and our broad set of instruments to promote peace can be useful to build bridges and to work out compromise solutions. But this crisis has also made clear that it will require a collective effort by everyone involved to restore stability both to Ukraine and to Europe at large. The OSCE has an important role to play on both accounts. When I last spoke to you, it was at the opening of the summer meeting in Baku. We were halfway into the Swiss chairmanship. I gave you an interim report on OSCE activities in Ukraine and progress regarding the other Swiss priorities. Now that the final quarter of our chairmanship has begun, I will talk about three priorities in the run-up to Basel, Ministerial Council, and beyond. These priorities are, first, continued efforts at de-escalation in Ukraine. Second, reforming and strengthening this organization, this OSCE. And third, launching a reflection process on how to overcome the broader crisis of European security. First, the first and most imminent, the short-term priority of the OSCE, ladies and gentlemen, remains Ukraine. In the past months, there has been a shift from a military to a political logic in this crisis, but it is a very fragile shift. We have seen that in the last days, and we are still far from a political solution. But in view of the more than 3,500 victims and the humanitarian misery caused by the military confrontation in eastern parts of Ukraine, this has been an important development. While August was still dominated by the risk of further military escalation, there is now a political momentum that requires our full support from all sides, ladies and gentlemen. The Minsk Protocol and the related Minsk Memorandum that was worked out at the highest level in Kiev and Moscow provide a basis for moving towards a political process to resolve this crisis. Some progress has already been made, but the parties must continue to take steps to make the ceasefire more sustainable and implement all commitments agreed in Minsk. All shooting, all shelling must now stop. Differences must be resolved through dialogue rather than force. The special monitoring mission of the OSCE has played a crucial role in these international efforts to assist Ukraine in de-escalating the crisis. Our monitors have done a tremendous job in a volatile environment, and I'd like to express here my deep gratitude to them. As a result of the Minsk agreements, the SMM, the Special Monitoring Mission, has been given new responsibilities, in particular monitoring the ceasefire and effective controlling the border, the Russian-Ukrainian border. The SMM has also monitored several rounds of simultaneous release of prisoners in recent weeks. It has been present at the release of more than 430 prisoners so far. As the mission adapts to the new monitoring needs, it is expanded to its full capacity of 500 monitors. It is our responsibility of us, the participating states, to enable the Special Monitoring Mission to live up to its many demanding tasks and continue to operate in safe conditions. This is why I have written to the OSCE member state, to the OSCE foreign ministers this week, and asked their government to contribute more experts, more specialized equipment, such as armored vehicles, and additional funding. The mission's budget has grown by an extra 30 million euro as a result of the Minsk provision. Ladies and gentlemen, I count on you. I count on your support, your strong support for the Special Monitoring Mission in national debates at home. Anyway, dialogue will remain key to stabilizing the situation in Ukraine. We can only resolve this crisis with Russia. We cannot resolve it against Russia. The Swiss chairmanship will continue to engage in diplomacy. We also stand ready to organize an e-meeting of the leaders of Ukraine and Russia in Switzerland, in Geneva, or elsewhere. It must be our objective to take the political process further in ways that allow resolving the conflict rather than freezing it. Through my special representative ambassador, Heidi Tagliavini, the Swiss chairmanship will continue to work together with representatives of Ukraine and of Russia in the trilateral contact group. The meetings and video conferences of this group, ladies and gentlemen, with the representatives of certain districts of Donetsk and Luhansk regions are an essential part of the peace efforts. The OSCE is also ready to assist inclusive dialogue within Ukraine that the Minsk Protocol envisages. A nationwide dialogue will be important to win back hearts and minds and foster a common sense of purpose. The recent clashes over Lenin monument have indicated how disputed Ukraine's identity remains. Such incidences suggest that local discussion formats could be useful too. This parliamentary assembly, your parliamentary assembly, can make vital contributions to de-escalation in Ukraine. One way is through parliamentary diplomacy. The talks between Russian and Ukrainian members of parliament can contribute to building confidence between the two countries. Another way is through observing the early parliamentary election on 26th of October. I trust that the Parliamentary Assembly and the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights will cooperate as effectively and closely as possible in observing this election, as they did also in the case of the presidential election in May. The second priority we will focus on is to feed the lessons learned from this Ukraine crisis into the Helsinki Plus 40 process. Enhancing the OSCE's capacity to act must be an essential part of reconsolidating Europe's security, European security, from the theory to the practical lessons. The OSCE's engagement in the Ukraine crisis has demonstrated the relevance of the organization as a forum for dialogue, but also as a an operational response and responder, and also as a normative intermediary to remind states of their commitments. But this engagement has also shown the importance of further improving the OSCE toolkit to deal with crises, the true capacity to act, ladies and gentlemen, and capacities for early warning, capacities for rapid reaction need to be strengthened, and the OSCE should also further increase its capacities in mediation and reconciliation. Switzerland possesses many years of experience in mediation and will continue to support the OSCE in this field and will support well beyond the chairmanship. I insist on that. Switzerland and OSCE, it's not about only 1 year. Monitoring of implementation of commitment should be improved too, especially in the human dimension. Moreover, the OSCE needs institutional reforms to remain fit for purpose. The budget process should be simplified, and we really should have a biannual budget. After 10 years of zero nominal growth, we should finally allocate financial and human resources to the OSCE that are commensurate with its tasks. Ladies and gentlemen, we must make this useful organization strong. For all this to materialize, strategic guidance on where the OSCE should be heading is required from political leaders. That is what Helsinki Plus 40 in the context of the Ukraine crisis must be about. Again, the Parliamentary Assembly can and should play a role in this. I have taken good note of the recent launch of your seminar series on Helsinki Plus 40 in Moscow. As we are working on the same issues, ladies and gentlemen, let us exchange our ideas and work together for a stronger OSCE. And let us allow for some out-of-the-box thinking when discussing the future of this organization. I will mention just one idea that has remained in my mind in recent weeks. The Ukraine crisis has shown how economic borderlines and frictions within the OSCE area can contribute to insecurity in Europe. Organizations other than the OSCE are obviously better suited to resolve trade disputes, but the OSCE has the potential of assisting efforts at strengthening regional connectivity in trade and infrastructure matters. We do not have to start from scratch here. OSCE work in the field of border security and border management has included efforts to facilitate cross-border trade. There has also been some fruitful OSCE cooperation with the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe on these issues. The OSCE could, for example, support the implementation of some trade agreements by using the expertise of the OSCE Border Management Staff College to improve cooperation between customs authorities. The OSCE could also encourage states to clarify their commitment under the various bilateral, regional, and global trade regimes existing in the OSCE area. Greater clarity and transparency of rules and procedures will enhance the potential to build confidence and trust. Most importantly, the OSCE, as an impartial actor, could monitor compliance with certain trade agreements, whatever trade deal within EU, Russia, and Ukraine work out. Some monitoring, some verification support measures will likely be required. I'm well aware that such ideas will not materialize overnight, but they are worth examining. Expanding confidence building and monitoring capacities in the OSCE's second dimension could make a vital contribution to strengthening pan-European security. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a third priority that will mark the final chapter and the final quarter of the Swiss chairmanship, and that is to launch a reflection process on how to overcome the broader crisis of European security. The Ukraine crisis is a tragedy. It is a tragedy for the Ukrainian people. It is also a blow to pan-European security. The violations of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity and the illegal annexation of Crimea by Russia have repercussions that go far beyond Ukraine. They call into question the foundation of European security as defined in the Paris Charter on the basis of the Helsinki Final Act. The growing political divide between Russia and the West have brought about great uncertainty as to the security and stability of our continent. Erosion of the consensus on European security set in more than a decade ago. Now that developments in Ukraine have aggravated the crisis of European security, we should address it without any delay. How can states recommit to the normative foundation of European security? What measures could be adopted to rebuild confidence? How can former cornerstones of pan-European security, such as conventional arms control, be rebuilt? What will it take to advance to the Astana goal and the OSCE as a security community? Finding common answers to these questions will take time. We should approach these issues with an open mind as to the result of such deliberation. There are three things that are clear from my perspective. First, the Helsinki principles and the OSCE commitments are not up for renegotiation. The issue here is how to ensure more effective adherence and implementation. Second, we should not aim at a major overhaul of Europe's security architecture. Rather, debates should focus on possibilities to reconfirm, to reinvigorate, and perhaps to complement existing elements of cooperative security in Europe. Third, as an inclusive platform for dialogues, the OSCE has an important role to play in these discussions on the broader issues of European security too. Last week, on the margins of the UN General Assembly, the Swiss chairmanship organized an informal ministerial-level meeting of OSCE participating states. We had a first informal discussion, ladies and gentlemen, on how to reconsolidate European security as a common project. It was a constructive debate in New York, and more than 20 foreign ministers and about 35 countries took the floor. We will resume our discussion in Basel in December when we meet again for the OSCE Ministerial Council. During the meeting in New York, I proposed to set up a chairmanship-commissioned panel of eminent persons with representatives of all regions of the OSCE. Over a period of, let's say, 6 months, the panel could produce a report that would take stock of the current situation and propose a set of recommendations concerning the next steps to be taken. There was broad positive feedback. We are now operationalizing this idea so that the panel can be launched in Basel. It is important that this panel be provided with opportunities for interacting with the political side, with the political level, with ministers, as well as with you, the General Assembly. Once a panel has issued recommendations, debates at ministerial level could be organized to take stock and decide on follow-up phases of this reflection process. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, in the early 1970s, Europe was divided. To reduce its division and search for common ground, governments decided to hold a conference on security and cooperation in Europe. The several hundred diplomats and experts who gathered in this hall in 1973 were told that the conference was likely to last just a few weeks. In the end, the negotiation took almost 2 years. Diplomats moved from hotels to houses. Some of them settled in Geneva for good. 2 participants from opposite sides of the Iron Curtain even married during the negotiations. A Soviet participant reported from here, "We are progressing at the rhythm of mankind." But then something remarkable happened. After more than 2,400 meetings, consensus was established on the final act. The notion of cooperative security has since transformed Europe for good. Today, our continent is far less divided than in the 1970s, but the common foundations of our security are eroding. War and insecurity have returned to Europe. We should do everything possible to reverse this negative development. There is no need to reinvent the CSC today. We are fortunate to have the OSCE, but what we should be inspired by is the vision, the determination of the founding fathers of the CSC to work out an inclusive system of security through dialogue and compromise. It is this kind of vision and determination that is needed in our efforts to reconsolidate European security as a common project. With this in mind, I wish you fruitful debate here in Geneva, perhaps not to the point of marriage, who knows? Anyway, it is the same constructive spirit. Thank you very much for your attention.
So in this spirit, we will finalize this opening session, and you can't believe we will have the break, even up till 5 minutes. We will continue in 5 minutes' time with our next issue on our agenda, but please, we have very, very limited time, so that I do ask you to be here in 5 minutes' time. Thank you very much. This session is closed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was actually here doing the negotiations.
So thank you so much. Thank you. Very kind.
Yeah.
Next, you know, regularly in Finland for house military
Oh, really?
yes,
Oi, oi, oi.
each for a year.
In the first beginning, I was also there, but I noticed that I was so unprofessional.
Yeah, and it's a little bit too dangerous.
It is. Some of them are so aggressive, so spirit-minded.
So I go to my place. You're happy? It's okay for you?
Yeah, it was fine. I mean, it was always we go a little over, start a little late.
That's a way. But you had a very not last week, but the year before that. Yeah.
Very strong, very successful.
Hello, Jack.